Welcome to another episode of The Corner Booth, the official podcast of restaurantowner.com. Today, the restaurant industry is changing faster than ever. Learn from successful independent restaurant operators and other industry leaders as they share best practices that will help you engage your team, delight your guests, and grow your business.
Hey, welcome everybody to another episode of Corner Booth. I'm Chris Tripoli with restaurantowner.com. Today we're coming to you from Houston, Texas, where I've got the pleasure of talking with a gentleman that I've known for years. In fact, just for full disclosure, we first met at another restaurant he opened up, which was setting records and winning awards years ago. So I've been a follower of Bryan Caswell ever since. But we're going to talk to Bryan about the opening process. And we're going to learn a lot about his new concept, Latuli, full service, fresh ingredients, multi-level, full bar, private parties, and it's only 3 months, not even 3 months old. So we're going to get a really good fresh take. For that, let me introduce you to chef founder of Latuli, Bryan Caswell. Bryan, thanks so much for joining us on Corner Booth.
Hey, Chris, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, this will be great. It's good to see you again. Love your place. I've only been once. We'll be again and again. But what I think we ought to do before we jump into your concept and some of the interesting things you have to share, maybe you can tell our listeners a little bit about you, how you first got interested in this industry, where your beginnings came from, maybe who were your early influences. So let's kind of start with that.
You know, I get asked that all the time, and every time I answer it, I seem to get closer and closer to maybe what the real answer is. I mean, I think at the end of the day, what first got me attracted to the food and beverage industry was the fact that, you know, I'm from South Louisiana, and my parents, it was any excuse to throw a party. And that was, and the hospitality piece, the service piece, you know, the entertaining piece was probably the thing that drew me to the industry in the beginning. You know, like normal people, well, not normal, but just like, you know, like a red-blooded American guy, just went out and graduated high school and went to college and thought, well, you know, I'll get a 4-year degree. But 5 years later, I had 2 years of credit if they'd accept some of the Ds. And, you know, I had 5 years of restaurant experience. And that's really all I wanted to do. You know, I just loved it. I loved the social aspect of it. And at this time, I was mostly in the front of the house. Worked at a place called Damien's for 3 years here in Houston, Texas, and really got into the service piece, right? The beauty of serving your fellow man and what that meant and what that could mean. And, you know, just the social aspect. Every day was kind of like a party, you know, a controlled party as it were. And then, you know, I decided that that the thing that I didn't have was the culinary piece. And so I hauled off and I went to the CIA, Culinary Institute of America. And then my life just took a sharp right-hand turn, man. I just got really into it and I just dove right in, spent those 2 years on campus and went to every single, you know, demo, volunteered for every kind of like assistance for the Master Chefs program. I just immersed myself in that culture and I never looked back.
Wow. Well, and the industry is obviously, you know, benefited, you know, because of that. But I think that's kind of an interesting kind of flip, because many times we listen to people who are strong, like you, from culinary aspects, CIA grads, loved it, understand the building of flavors, and drive the bus, you know, from that direction. Then they'll tell us that they sort of had to build a team and maybe learn a little bit about the service aspects, whereas you come from loving what you call the controlled party, the social part of the business, the front of the house job first, then flipped in to understand the culinary aspects. It's kind of interesting.
Well, you know, I mean, every restaurant's like a Star Wars bar, and then Land of Misfit Toys had a baby, right? I mean, there's just one of every single thing that you could possibly imagine. You've got a dishwasher that maybe just got out of jail, and you got a billionaire at the table, and every socioeconomical plane in between. And,
Right.
you know, you have to manage all those personalities. And I just love that. I love that part of it, right? You just the constant moving, never stopping, like a tachyon, right? Never moving, never stopping, just constantly going.
Well, that
And I
is
just, you know,
something. And that is something that obviously some restaurant operators today may have missed. We deal with an awful lot of people, of many who are successful in our industry, but they came to us from other industries. Maybe they started as sort of like one of your customers, love what you do, can't wait to take early retirement because they probably hate their job selling oil equipment or whatever. But they made some good money. So what do? They take early retirement. They risk hundreds of thousands of dollars opening up a small cafe or a, pizzeria or whatnot. And, sometimes they build a good team and they win and they're successful. Yay. Sometimes, of course, they trip. But whether they're winning or not, what they're missing is that little equation that you just posed, where if you work the positions and climbed through the grit from the dish machine to the prep, from the customers to the understanding the socializations, it just sort of fills the bloodstream and in a way that no other can.
Well, I think also just in the way that labor is today, if you don't understand every man's plight in that restaurant, you're not going to gain their respect. And things motivate people in such a different way these days. Before, you could just hire a gun on, like, for instance, let's talk about like a grill cook. Oh yeah, we'll just pay $20 an hour and we'll get the best grill cook we can possibly buy. It doesn't really work that way anymore, right? I mean, you almost fare better by finding a guy with a good attitude and a good work ethic and trying to train him up. It doesn't equate anymore. And, people are motivated by different things than money now. They're motivated by, balance of life. Life balance is
Yes.
a huge thing. General respect. There's no chefs are yelling and screaming in the kitchen anymore. Not if they want to, not if they don't want 100% turnover every month. I mean,
Yeah.
it doesn't work.
Well, that's very, very true. That's very true. Some of us oldies, I have to throw myself in there, remember
Me
those.
too.
I remember my first kitchen position. I was learning. I was excited to learn, but there was also a little bit of that fear because Lord have mercy, the chef would throw saute pans against the wall to get your attention. And anyway, and the language we used back then is language that, of course, we can't even print today. So yeah, I hear you, but I just want to underline those couple of good points. So here, you just opened a restaurant, and we're going to get through that process. That means a ton of staff had to be found. Tough labor market. You don't just need a few, like, say, people who are currently operating might always need a few. You needed a ton to open up. And I want listeners to make a note of that it sounds like what you were most successful at is if you're looking for people for their personal traits, getting just a good person, knowing that you can train them, rather than throwing money at, say, what it was, say, the most experienced grill cook that you could find. I think that was the example you used. And obviously that worked for you.
Yeah, I mean, so, I'm a little bit of a bad news bears kind of employer. I look for people that have the talent, and I always do my due diligence. I always call and look at their references and stuff. But I one thing I tell people all the time: just because somebody says don't hire an individual or they're not quote unquote rehireable, doesn't mean they're not worthwhile. Right? Because some things just don't click, personalities don't click, it could have been a time in their life, you have to give people a chance to shine. I mean, again, hold them accountable when they're in your restaurant, of course, but, you can find some gems out there if you just kind of polish it off a little bit.
Look a little bit deeper. I like that because yes, there are going to be some of those people that for one reason or other didn't fit. They leave, they're judged non-rehirable, and maybe they are still, however, if they're in the right position to give a chance to shine. So let's kind of back up a little bit. Before it came to the selection of staff and training, which is such a big part of an opening, there's many, many steps that I don't know how long, it took you to get you to the opening of Latuli that was almost 3 months ago. And we haven't had in a long time, I think, somebody with a fresh opening to share with our listeners how the opening process worked, where the idea comes from, preliminary planning, budgeting, finding the right location, finding the right people, the team to raise funds with. These are things that, a lot of people are tripping over. And obviously you very recently successfully did. Would you mind sharing your process on how it came about and how things worked for you in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, so many things have changed since COVID, and the funny thing is that they haven't always changed in the same direction. I mean, everything kind of like split like a shotgun, just kind of, she hit the wall in so many different ways. I mean, in Houston specifically, we were looking just outside of Loop. My exercise started with my partner, Allison Knight. I started as a consultant with her. I've known her for a very long time. Her husband was an investor in some of my other restaurants back in the day. And, in the beginning, she was like, oh, I want a small little, neighborhood second gen space we were looking for.
Okay.
And the inventory in the area that she wanted, which is mainly the Memorial Villages area, just outside the Loop, there just wasn't any inventory at all. I personally think, and I wasn't interested in opening anything at the time. That's not what I was looking for. I was enjoying my life as a consultant at the time. And, I wasn't really, I wasn't really big on Inside the Loop. Inside the Loop, Houston has changed dramatically in the past 5 to 6 years. I think it's not so much about competition. For me, competition is not a scary thing. For me, it's oversaturation.
Well,
So many restaurants. And if you have a guy that's or a girl or a couple that fancies himself as a foodie, they love that new opening. They love to go to the new openings. And it got to a point where I think it was 75 restaurants inside the Loop in a year had opened. That customer, that regular of yours can't even get through the openings. They can't even fully get through the openings to come back to you to see you once a month. Right. So it just was a weird environment. So, loved the idea of helping her open a place out there. And we looked and looked and looked, could not find anything. And then this piece of property came up on I-10, and she kind of threw me for a loop. She said, what if I bought that piece of property? And at the time, and it's the old Gorman's Cleaners on I-10 and Campbell Road exit. And I was like, man, I really think it might be one of the better locations in Houston. A lot of people are moving out in that area. You've got everything from Katy to, the demographics that you can work with, everything from Katy to the energy corridor all the way to the Heights on I-10, which I-10 is probably the least screwed up freeway we have in Houston. So you can move back and forth. It's got a big draw. And, she said, okay, if I buy it, will you partner with me? And I was like, okay, well, that was it. That was it. It's all she told me. And I jumped in with both feet.
So it helps with somebody that you knew, had a good relationship with, and a previous relationship in other restaurants. So I realize some of you listeners out there that are in the startup process might not have that. You might not have, say, history. But whether you do or not, though, that's the key, though. It's starting with the right people.
Yeah.
And the selection of the right person, financial partner, I get it. I think the second thing I kind of want to underline here is a reference to Inside the Loop. Every city has that. That's that premium urban area, hustle and bustle of the more expensive homes and the higher priced shopping and the more expensive office areas. So you would consider that the prime area. And I love the comment that you made there that sometimes just because it might be known as prime, it's the honeybee, man. It's attracting and might be over competitive and attracting too many openings. So for those of you who are out there and you're looking, what I heard here was you define what you're looking for and then you stay the course. It took a little while, but then look at this. They stumbled across a property with a great freeway exposure. And you're right. It's a pretty good accessible freeway when you compare it to most.
Yeah, and it helps that we back up to some of the more affluent areas of the city. The villages are really interesting. It's different than any other city, Houston. We have multiple municipalities that operate within our own city limits, right? The other great, amazing thing that happened is that we built in Headwood Village. That meant that we did not have to permit through the city of Houston, which was just an amazing. I mean, it was like, it's like when you wear weights and you run with weights on your legs and then you take them off and you feel like you're fleet footed, you're super fast. That's what it felt like. I mean, we permitted it in weeks rather than months.
Sure.
I mean,
That's great.
It's a community that felt like they wanted us to be there, which I can't say how great that felt.
So then you move into excited about the site, great to have a workable jurisdiction. Then you've got to go through getting the idea on paper, design, layout, budgeting. How long does that take? And is it true what we're hearing that, opening costs are just staggeringly high compared to where they were a few years ago?
Yeah, I mean, costs haven't gone down that much at all, and I think probably the one that's the most surprising to me is equipment costs.
Huh.
Equipment costs, everything went up, and I think that by the time we started buying most building materials, they'd starting to soften a little bit. We used wood studs instead of metal, and so wood was softening, and so was gypsum and all that stuff was getting a little bit better. But kitchen equipment hit 60% after COVID, and it has not come down, not even a touch. I mean, it
Wow.
is bizarre how, so this is my 17th opening, and it made me blush, the numbers that I would see on paper. It almost felt like I was a little out of touch because I hadn't had that exercise in a long time.
Mm.
Or at least I hadn't had it since after that huge price spike. The other thing that was interesting, even though I've done so many openings, this was my first ground up construction from scratch, right?
Okay.
Which is, normally I would say if you give me a box, I can make anything work with a box. I haven't worked in New York. I mean, people are like, oh, it's a small kitchen. You can do anything with anything, right? You can make it work, make it happen, as they say in the industry. But when somebody says, "Okay, what do you want?" Right? Like, just come up and draw your dream kitchen. It's a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. Right. So, I mean, my due diligence in that, my ability to pull the trigger took a little bit longer because I was just petrified of making a mistake.
I hear you. And you're right. It's different. You're designing from scratch. You're building from ground up. No, obviously, it's gonna take longer, it's also gonna cost more, but there are those challenges, as you mentioned, that if you hadn't had a lot of experience in an area, kinda new. The
The other Go ahead. The other thing was that the size of the restaurant was directly related to the price of the property, right? So
Mhm.
initially we were 7,200 square feet and change. And initially I wasn't looking to do something that large, but in order to make the numbers right, the place had to generate a certain amount of cash. We had to turn a certain amount of tables.
Right. That's exactly right. And let's talk a little bit about that. That 7,200 square feet encompasses the complete concept, where it's a sit-down, full-service restaurant with some outside seating, a bar, and upstairs event space, a downstairs party room as well, correct?
Yes, sir. That's right.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
so you touch all the bases. But that's a really good point for people to make. The size, in order to get you the capacity you needed, is a direct correlation with what kind of income is going to be needed to develop to carry the debt and be profitable. That's a serious equation. I've had experiences where that was not well done, where people selected a site, and then once we took a hard look at the concept, learned later that there may not be enough size to get enough butts in seats, to get enough table turns, to create the revenue needed to carry the occupancy and still have profit left over. So those of you who are listening, make sure that you're spending a lot of time on that part of the equation, that the size, capacity has got to directly correlate with the income, as it does in your case, that you're going to need in order to carry the investment that's made and still have profit left over. So you got a bigger place than you were first thinking. All I know is it came out beautifully. Maybe you could take a couple minutes now for the people who haven't been there and paint a picture of Latuli, the concept, what it represents, the hours, price range, whatever it is you'd like to tell us.
So let's start with the name. So in the beginning, when I was in a consultant capacity, we were trying to pick a name for this second gym space, and she had a bank account and a name for her kind of family trust that was called Latuli, and it's the first two letters of her three kids, Lawson, Tucker, and Lily, which I love. I tell people all the time, my father was a petroleum engineer, and he was kind of a wildcatter, and he had this saying that I always think about with restaurants. He's like, everybody wants to name the project, nobody wants to run the project. When you have a meeting of all the investors of how to name it, every single one of them shows up. But if you have a meeting about how to run it, you get maybe 20%, right? So, but so going into that, like picking a name for a restaurant's a very difficult thing. And I think mainly it should mean something to the person that's running it. I think that's very important. But also it should be easy to say. It should have a connotation. Like somebody should read it and say, oh, this must be French, or this must be Italian, or this must be, Mediterranean, or, what have you. And I think, whether or not you can get a good website matters. There's a lot of the different factors, right? And
Mm.
we kept so then when we said, okay, we're going to be partners in this deal, she said, okay, what are we going to name it? And I said, I kept coming back to that name. For some reason, it just spoke to me. And, they're like, well, your kids aren't in it. I was like, that doesn't matter. Like, it just had this kind of ring to it. Right. And it rolls off your tongue. And we got Latuli.com, which is nearly impossible to have a name of a restaurant and have .com. So, so we went with that. We just went full bore with that. And I think it makes sense. It does have maybe a Mediterranean kind of connotation to it, which I enjoy, even though our food is definitely global. That's always been my kind of thing, concept wise. I kind of, global concepts, because I've worked all over the world. So, like global concepts and global techniques with local product as much as we can get, local flavors, local ideas. Honestly, that's what I learned in my 9 years with John George. No matter where we opened a restaurant around the world, the first thing you would say was, what can we get locally? And then let's decide what the menu is.
Got it. So going back to the name first, I do. I love it. Love the story. I love the personalization. But you're right. It does sound like it could be, I don't know, maybe a little Mediterranean. It could mean things. When I first saw it, I thought it was kind of an interesting name that probably represented a place. So I'm thinking, I'm looking for Latuli, Louisiana.
Right.
And coming up empty. But I love it. That's great. Okay, so let's do this. We're doing a global direction on the cuisine using finest local ingredients. So what's the basic style of cooking, types of items that might be always on the menu?
Well, I'm always more of a seafood heavy guy, and it's always
Right.
been my deal with reef and all my background. So it's definitely going to be in the 40 percentile seafood area. But a lot of it is just about Houston, Texas, big, bold, in your face flavors has to be. It's different for when I worked in New York. New York had more of a subtlety to it. More of a delicate nature to the dishes. You could do a steamed fish. You do a steamed fish in Houston, they're going to throw it back at you, right? So
Mm.
it just, it's all about reading the room, when you're developing a menu. And for me, probably the most frustrating thing about me with anybody that I've ever worked with is that I cannot create a menu until I'm actually in the kitchen. If I write a menu a year before the opening, I'll change it 25 times. And then the bad thing about that is that then I get away from the box. So I tell people all the time, create the box that you're going to work within, right? Your customer has to know, okay, I'm going to this restaurant. It's going to be in this box. This box is whatever. You can just draw whatever box you want. And if you work outside that box, you're going to freak out your customer. Right. They're going to feel uneasy because they're like, I thought this was supposed to be this, or I thought this was supposed to be that. So you have to work within whatever concept you decide is going to be. And so, have that concept, have that idea once the kitchen gets down, because I hate to do things twice. So, I can write something on a piece of paper, but it really doesn't mean anything until it's on the
Right.
plate. Right. And it doesn't mean anything. I might have the greatest dish in the world, but it doesn't work in that kitchen. Right. It won't come out of that kitchen no matter what you do. Or it might make that kitchen crash. It has too many moves. So
Yeah.
everything has to kind of have this synergistic thing when it comes out of the kitchen. And so that's how I develop menus.
Great principle. Great principle. Define the box of what the concept's supposed to represent. That still gives you a wide variety of regional tastes in your box. You've got seasonal favorites. You've got different, menu offerings just to kind of keep things, fresh, but without going outside the box so that it's not going to be scary and a customer's not going to come in and trip and go, where am I?
And the other thing is your staff. You don't know what your staff is capable of in the beginning, right? You have to feel that out. And that means front and back of the house. Like sometimes, certain dishes need a piece, a table piece where they're pouring something into a bowl, or maybe they're doing a table side service or something. And you have no idea whether you're there or not, right? So
Yeah.
I would say the menu is about 80% of where I would like it to be, and we're still building, we're still pushing, right? We're not making our own sausage yet. We just started yesterday. These types of things that we're gonna do, in the restaurant, our own charcuterie. We just started making our own guanciale and those kind of things. You can't start off with this huge idea and do it all at once. You can't have everything at once. Otherwise, you just increase your failure rate, right? So I like to take things a little bit at a time.
Excellent point. Excellent point. Because that's another area where, yes, as an industry, we stumble a little bit. That going back to that work within the box helps us try not to be everything to everybody. And then that point where you're trying to define what you know you can do consistently and that the staff can do effectively helps us work with what works and then move slowly. Those are two excellent recommendations when it comes to menu management. I hope everyone's making light of that because we go wrong sometimes as an industry.
Yeah.
Outside the box, trying to do too much, doing something again because the chef or owner knows it, but the staff has trouble with it, or the floor staff doesn't understand it. Yeah, I hear you.
I mean, the other way yeah, and again, a lot of owners don't like to hear this either, is that when you're open, doesn't matter how many people want to have reservations. I learned a very important thing when we opened El Real and just completely crashed for a lot of reasons. But it was just too many people, too much. We had some equipment failure, we had a bunch of stuff going on. But the customer doesn't know that, doesn't care. I have a personal belief that if you make a customer wait, they will come back. If you fail, they will not come back. And they'll tell everybody and their grandmother that you failed and don't go there. So, I mean, we choked reservations really hard in the beginning. And they're banging on the door trying to get in there. Man, I had people calling me from when I was in grade school. I hadn't talked to them in 25, 30 years. Right? Can I get in? Sorry, buddy. Can't come in. Right? They'd show up at the door. Sorry, I can't do it. You have to give yourself a chance to succeed. And it doesn't matter how many times you do, a mock service. You can do a mock service for a month. Unless it's real, unless people are paying for it, it doesn't count. It's not the same.
Mhm.
Right? It's
Right.
not real life. It doesn't sting when you make a mistake if they're not paying for it.
Mhm.
So we choked the reservations. We did about 60 for the first week. Then we went to 100 for the next week, then 125 for the week after that, and so on and so forth. And it really was
And
the
you
right thing to do.
staggered. And you did another really good, I think, opening principle. You staggered your service. Didn't you open up evenings only for a while?
That's right. We did evenings only for a little bit, like 3.5, almost 4 weeks. And then
Yeah.
we went into lunch, and we're starting brunch this weekend. Same,
There you
same,
go.
same principle. Trying to do everything at once is just a fool's errand, man. I mean, maybe you could pull it off, but I mean, I'm trying to give myself the highest chance for success, right? And as
Well, and
long as
that's
you
what
can
an
afford to
opening's
do
all
it,
about.
right?
And there you go. I mean, that's the bottom line. That's what the opening's all about is just giving yourself an opportunity to succeed. It starts with the fun part, the idea and the name. Then I realize you get into the nitty-gritty, you're learning things, construction, equipment prices, crazy schedule. Okay. But yeah, what it's all about though is just that. It's just giving yourself every opportunity to succeed. If we connect and if we succeed, we're profitable. Yay. If we miss, then nothing else mattered. So those are two really good things I hope people are remembering. If the guest has to wait, you can still win. They can come back. But if a guest sees you fail, if you can't perform, they usually go away. They don't come back. And you're right.
Right.
It isn't just about the guest being unhappy today. On their way out to the car, if they're unhappy, their social media posting, their Facebooking, they're getting all of they jump into their Suburban and before they start the ignition, they've posted, oh, my horrible experience, can't come back here for whatever reason out of this. And we need to avoid all of that.
And what happened was, and this was not intentional. People think a couple of industry guys have accused me of this, but like that I was trying to create a demand. Right? Which it turned out that everybody's like, "Oh, you're the hottest stick in the town. You can't get it." I was like, "Yeah, I guess that's true. I don't know." But I mean, we were choking it. Not, I wasn't telling anybody that, but it
Mhm.
created this phenomenon where, when people can't get into stuff, they seem to want to go more.
Very true. Okay, so now we're open, we're lunch, we're dinner, we've got a happy hour program, you're booking parties, and brunch is right around the corner.
That's right.
Well, tell us a little bit about that. Is that a Saturday, Sunday brunch or just a Sunday brunch?
Yeah, Saturday, Sunday brunch. I mean, with the way, I mean, we bought the property, but we're still paying rent, and rents are so high now for everybody. It used to be like, oh, we'll close Sundays, or we won't do lunch on Saturdays, and those types of things. Like Reef was always closed on Sunday and Saturday lunch. Nowadays, you have to look at every single profit center,
Yes.
whether that's to go, whether that's, whether that's catering, whether that's in-house catering, whether that's, and for us, what we're pushing really hard right now is that between 2 and 5 o'clock, right? How do we get, $500, $1,000, $2,000, $5,000 between 2 and 5, right? Which changes everything. You know, we're doing the Saturday, Sunday brunch mainly. We need to drive. We don't need to drive Saturdays, but we need to drive Sundays. And Sunday's a little soft for us. So, I mean, that's one of the main reasons we're doing that is jumping into that.
Well, and it seems like for people who are maybe involved in an opening, it seems like being able to reach your customer profile. You did a really good job talking about how you found the site and where you are and how balanced it is from freeway to business to affluent housing. It sounds like to me, the more you know the guest, the smarter you always are. There is a weekend brunch guest there. So yeah, if people don't have that, well, then maybe that's not a day part for them. But if you really understand your guest, you want to fill their needs all the time: lunch, dinner, happy hour, brunch, etc.
Yeah, so one of the things that we knew from the start is that not only do we have a great local, we had a great local neighborhood, but we also have a big family component, right? So there's that whole argument with restaurateurs when my ex partner was oh, we don't even need to have a high chair, like he didn't want kids at all, but
Mm,
you have to find that balance. So we became really family friendly in the main dining room, and the bar, which is a large bar, has about 60 seats, is no children allowed. Period. In the story,
okay,
no minors. So, I
right.
mean, I think, I'm really interested to see the Saturday, Sunday, whether Sunday turns into be more of a after church crowd, family crowd, and maybe Saturday's a little bit more, Saturday fun day kind of crowd, or maybe it's both on both sides. It'll be interesting to see how it pans out.
Well, and it's nice that you've got a facility that can probably handle both, because I could see that if there is a lot of neighborhood, large families after church, well, especially if it's a nice day, you've got the dining room, you've got your, smaller private dining room, and you've got your outside patio. People who want to get away from that, we've got some really nice seating in the bar.
But, well, one of the biggest complaints I hear from people over 40 is where do I go to have a drink, a nice drink where it's not mayhem. Another thing that we did that I was a huge, I mean, I pushed really hard is that we have a service bar that only serves drinks to the dining room. So
Right,
the bar handles its own people, right? And
right.
I just, when I'm at a bar, I can't stand when wait staff members come in banging on the thing. I need this cocktail. I need this, and it creates this frenzy in a place
Mhm.
that, for all intents and purposes, otherwise could be this nice, cool, calm, like sexy bar, right? So I wanted that to be, separate one. And the other thing is, I drink a lot more cocktails with dinner than I do wine nowadays. And for whatever reason, if you want to get me 3 or 5, depends on how fast you can get them to me. If I'm gonna be
Right.
there for 3 hours, 4 hours, I'm a big guy, I can drink 5 drinks, no problem, but it's just a matter of how quickly you can pump those drinks out. And you, like everybody else probably that's listening to this podcast knows that the biggest profit center in any restaurant is booze, right? I mean, you have
Mhm.
a profit margin that doesn't exist with any other product that you're selling. So, I
That's
mean, we
true.
wanna try to definitely manipulate that to the best of our ability.
Well, let's move into the next market segment we haven't talked much about, and that is not lunch, not dinner, not brunch, event planning. You've got an upstairs and you've got a downstairs smaller private dining room. How does that business, say, affect operations when you've got, parties? Is that always a different menu, set menu, or can you be flexible and still, service that while you're open in the restaurant and the bar?
Well, I've always liked the idea of giving people the kind of like the dedicated service of saying that everything's custom, right?
Right.
Not necessarily 100% true, but I mean, you want that customer to feel like they're getting a custom experience, right? A tailored experience every single time. So we'll pretty much do whatever they want, but the problem is that we have, it again, it goes back to your staff and what they can handle. Can we do choices after 15 people, right? Does it have to be a set first course after 15 people? Then does it have to be a set, second course after 35 people or 30 people?
Right.
So we're kind of going through those motions right now, feeling that out. The other profit center that I'm really excited about is we're going to start opening up maybe next month is the outside catering. Funny enough, we decided we had some setbacks in construction, so we decided the fourth quarter of last year, we started our catering business, and we were booked 5, fourth quarter, 5 days out of every week. in that neighborhood, in our neighborhood. So that's another thing we're going to have to try to figure out how to temper and how much we can afford to do at any one particular time.
Sure. But knowing that also probably helped you design that, going back to that overly expensive, shocking equipment. You probably designed a little extra space,
Oh
storage,
yeah.
production
Yep.
facility, yet knowing that you're going to be doing interesting menus upstairs and off-premise catering.
Oh yeah. We loaded for bear. I mean, I've got plenty of
Good.
firepower. Storage is something I don't know anybody ever has enough of. But we're actually building another 700 square feet that we permitted and designed before we opened and ran utilities before we opened, but didn't build it out of budgetary concerns. But now looking at it, we're like, okay, we're building as fast as we can, and that's going to be more of a prep slash storage slash wine area.
Good. Good, good, good. Sounds wonderful. Sounds like this first year, everything is going to click. We're only in our third month and you're clicking in the brunch. Can we talk a little bit about your first holiday season? I mean, here it is right around the corner. You're probably already thinking about how do you market? How do you plan parties? And how will operations work during your first, holiday season?
The hardest employee I've always found to find, and it's a chicken and an egg thing. Like you need a banquet manager, but you really don't want to pay for one until after you have all the banquet business, right? And luckily, we've just been busy from the beginning, and so we've hired a girl named Natalie. She's doing a great job. So somebody that's dedicated to nurturing that side of the business, building those relationships. And she works with me very closely to kind of tailor every menu, and I can also tell her, "Hey, look, I've got a great deal on this. I've got a great deal on that. Let's try to push the crab. Let's try to push the snapper or what have you, depending on what I can get or what we're running long on."
And you're right, that is a difficult person because they have to have, I guess, equal parts, the ability to understand the concept the way you want them to promote it correctly, but then have the, detail knowledge to plan. You're looking for someone
Right.
who's gonna be that street cop, the coordinator,
Right.
a
And
planner.
and and they need knowledge of the internal restaurant business. So whenever I got into big, hotels, the biggest problem was the person selling had no idea what we did. Right?
Right.
The person selling had no idea what it took to create these things that they were selling. And so we were able to find a young lady who's really in tune with and she helped us open the restaurant as an AGM. So she has full understanding of the operations of the restaurant before going off, separating, not completely, but she's a little bit, it's like on the side, right? She's not, because it takes so much to answer all those inquiries, right? It's a
Sure.
lot of work. So, I mean, I'm very happy about that. I mean, it's something I've always found very hard to find.
How did the rest of the team come together? I mean, obviously, we just talked about what I would agree is one of the hardest pieces of the puzzle to put together. But, being the executive chef, founder of the concept and the driving force, you've got to surround yourself with, I guess, a lot of complementary talent for daytime, nighttime, bar operations, service, front of the house. Can you maybe talk a little bit about the management structure you put together, what you were looking for, how many components there are to this structure?
Sure. Well, the first and foremost, had to find a GM, and I was very, very lucky that I called a woman that I had worked with for many years named Lauren Hernandez. She opened a bank with me. She ran Reef with me for 7 years. She was
Oh,
working at Doris Metropolitan for a number of years after that. And, I joke about it. She's like, what's going on? I go, I'm looking for a GM. She goes, oh, what are you looking for? I go, I'm looking for you or somebody like you. And she says, "Well, let me come take a look." And she came on board, which is great. And Lauren's just a pro. I mean, just a old school badass pro. And I'm humbled. I've been in the industry for a little while. I mean, some people say I'm an OG. I don't know if I'm that old yet, but I'm getting close. And I've got about 20% of our staff that have worked with me in the past. And so that's just it makes it a lot easier because people that I know, people that I've worked with, we kind of have a shorthand. And then, kitchen staff wise, I got lucky with a guy from New York and a couple other sous chefs that I've worked with before in the past. And the hardest part's always the wait staff, right? Because
okay.
and bartenders, because I don't care who you are or where you are, how pretty the place is, the really quality wait staff members and bartenders don't come on until they've already see you're making money. They just don't.
Right.
It takes time. And so you just have to you have to, you know, and that's what's good about choking reservations and allowing, that way every staff member every wait staff member doesn't have a 5-table station and they just go down.
Right.
They get in the weeds every night. So you just have to slowly build. And literally, I mean, I don't know. Everybody goes, "Are you still hiring?" I go, "Who's not hiring?" Right? When have you ever not been 15% down? Like you're always looking to better your station.
Right.
So I mean, it's a daily struggle. We pool tips, right?
Okay.
So it's an interesting thing. It's the first time I've ever done it. I've always wanted to do it. I mean, the restaurants that I've seen that have done it well have been able to really snap up real quickly with a good quality, even tempered, consistent staff. When you do it the other way, it's the old school way, you can have, maybe 35 to 55% of your wait staff is really, really good because they always get the really good station. Things get territorial. There's all those things, like there's improprieties that happen with the hostess and, who's getting the right table. And this way, everybody's on an even keel and nobody gets screwed any night. Everybody makes good money every night. And it's worked out really well for us so far.
You do that with the front of the house servers and the bar, or
Right, bars separate, but I mean, there's servers in the bar. Yeah, but we do it with the whole thing.
I think that's interesting, and I'm glad that that's working. Good for you. So it creates more of a team approach. Obviously, that means if we're all working, regardless of front station, back station, we're all pooling tips. I should pay attention to the whole room, help everybody do everything.
Right, that's the idea. I mean, it's a bit of I guess it's the only thing I believe in socialism.
Hey,
It's the only socialist thing.
socialism for service. It's a
Right.
thing.
Maybe.
Well, I'm glad it's working. That sounds wonderful. So, obviously, you had the advantage because you are very well established with a lot of experience. So you were able to pool some talent, from your previous experiences. For people who are going through the process that you just completed and maybe don't have that, about how long should they be planning, to find and bring in staff and do pre-opening training so that maybe they're trying not to be rushed and avoid some of the mistakes that a rushed opening, can create.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the biggest pitfalls that people have in an opening is either bringing staff in too quickly or too late.
Mm,
I mean, it's a day. I think, when you get to that point to where you're about to be open or you're about to get that C of O, I mean, it's really a daily question, and you
yeah.
kind of have to be on the phone. Okay. Some people you have to bring on too early, right? I
Mhm.
mean, you can't bring on a GM too early, right? Just anybody, if you have a quality GM, you've got to bring that person on and that you got to have them at least, I don't know, a month ahead of time. There's just so many things.
Yeah, I think that, and I'm glad you mentioned that. I think key management should be there at least 1 or 2 months ahead of time, because for a lot of you folks that are maybe going through an opening, and if you haven't done it a lot, like Bryan, then what you're going to be experiencing is a lot of craziness those last couple of months. And if you've got your key managers there to help you with the setup, with the interviewing, also with the preliminary training of others, that's a wonderful thing. But boy, if we bring them on too late, they're running around trying to get their bearings and learn at the same time you're expecting them to lead others.
Yeah. They have to understand the full program. You'll have to be on the same page because look, the labor piece is a dizzying prospect. There's so many, applications, so many steps that you have to make to onboard each employee, so many things that you have to be done. And you just forget people's names. I mean, it's a lot of stuff. It depends on what size you are, of course.
Sure.
We have quite a few employees. We're pushing
Mhm.
almost 200, right? But
Okay.
I mean, it just you really need a lot of eyes. You can't be the only person hiring.
Well, I think those are good principles, whether you're hiring 20 or, you're as large as you are and you're having 200. So, yeah, thank you very much for that. We're beginning to run out of time here, but you have done so much to clarify the opening process in such a short period of time. That's wonderful. I thank you for sharing the steps, the investor working, the searching for the site, the opening process, the managing of the timeline. I'm so glad that you were able to tell us how you structured the timing, the reservations, the training of the staff. I mean, this is just great textbook stuff. So Really, really happy that you were able to share your principles on the opening process. Love everything you're doing at Latuli. Thanks again for your time today, Bryan. Best of luck, man. I hope sales just keep building. I hope these other day parts really, really connect well. And we'll have to have you come back maybe to give us a little update so we can talk about events and we can talk about off-premise catering a little bit more.
You got it. Thanks a lot, man. Appreciate you having me, Chris.
And for everybody else, we really, really hope that you enjoyed the tips today. Go make it a great shift, and hopefully we will meet up again real soon on another Corner Booth.
Thank you for joining us on the Corner Booth. We'll be back next Tuesday with more inspiration, insights, and industry best practices to help you engage your team, delight your guests, and grow your business.